Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is called the 10 most important bands in music history, Pushback. So this is a follow-up to what is now the biggest video on my channel. About a month ago I put out what I thought was quite an innocent video in a series of videos that I've done, the best albums of all time, the best jazz albums, the best guitarist, the best drummer, and I thought, let's concentrate on bands, not big band jazz bands, not solo artists who had bands, specifically bands. Let's just concentrate on bands where the band is greater than the sum of its parts. You know for the band, like the Jam or the Police, that type of a band. Not like, say, James Brown or Jimi Hendrix, where there's a certain member that seems to eclipse everybody else. Bands. So I thought it'd be great to do that. So I did it. And it's now become the biggest video on my channel, which I'm very chuffed about. But of course, because of this, I have received a lot of pushback in the comments. Over 2,000 comments. Some of them, liking what I'm doing. Others, not so much. So what I'm going to do on this video is firstly go through the list again. A lot of people complained I went through it too slowly. So if you've just clicked on this and want to know what I think are the 10 greatest bands of all time, I will run through that very quickly. Then I will look at some of the pushback, and then I will push back against some of that pushback. And then that will be another video, hopefully. So let's kick off, shall we? So the list. So at number 10, I had The Who. The Who are along with, the Kinks, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they're one of the important bands to emerge out of the British scene in the 1960s. I gave them extra weight because of John Entwistle pretty much defining electric bass playing for a whole generation. For Keith Moon for sort of defining what a rock drummer would be in terms of this sort of animal-esque, mad person, which still hasn't really been surpassed. The idea that we have the idea of sort of the blonde golden god that's going to be taken up by Led Zeppelin. Of course, the incredible songwriting, the invention of the rock opera, and most importantly, Pete Townshend's association with Marshall amps, where they got the rock bands louder. You got to think the Beatles couldn't really play live, not to a large audience because they were so quiet. The Who changed all that. So they're in at number 10. So that's who I had at number 10, and those are the reasons why. Some people thought it should be higher, and some people thought they shouldn't be on the list, but it wasn't that contentious a choice. At number 9, I had one of the most contentious choices on the list, which was Nirvana. From my point of view as a music teacher, I've spent the last 30 years teaching young kids. These are kids that are coming into music college at 16, 17, they picked up a guitar. And this has never gone away. Nirvana is still a touchstone band for them. They're still learning those songs. It's still inspiring kids. It completely changed the rock industry. You can almost say the rock industry was going through a certain cycle until Nirvana came along. Of course, the other grunge bands like Soundgarden, like Alice in Chains, like Pearl Jam, those bands are so important, incredibly important, but none of them affected culture. Nirvana affected culture. They changed fashion. I can remember when grunge came out, watching a fashion show and everybody was walking up and down with baggy jumpers on, looking like they dressed themselves out of a tip. So that's who I had at number 9, but people felt that they shouldn't be on the list, and that was a big problem. As was the next band on the list, which was at number 8, the Sex Pistols, right? Some people felt that I should have said the Ramones. Now, I think that's a worthy argument, and I'm going to get into that later on. But I think that's a reasonable pushback, to be honest. And I think I could have swapped out the Ramones for the Sex Pistols. But if I'd have done that, the look of the Ramones, they looked like Grease rejects, didn't they? They didn't look like punks. And again, the thing that always trumps it for me is the cultural influence. The idea of a punk comes from the Sex Pistols. It doesn't come from the Damned, it doesn't come from the Clash, it doesn't come from the Stooges, it doesn't come from the New York Dolls, it doesn't come from the Ramones. And also there's an English working classness about the Sex Pistols. But was there, now one of the things I didn't touch on in the video was the fact that Malcolm McLaren portrayed himself as some sort of Svengali figure over a group that had no talent, and it was all bluff. That was part of the ethos, right? I think that's grossly unfair. I think I saw the Sex Pistols when they reformed in 2008, and what I saw was an incredibly tight rock band like AC/DC with an incredibly charismatic array of characters, especially John Lydon, whose lyrics were like poetry, like with English poetry, and it was profound. And he drew me into a world that I felt I was a part of, regardless of who I was. This is something the Ramones never did for me. So that's why I did number 8. I won't. You know, we'll get into this, but those of you who want to get through the list quick, I will get through the list as quick as I can. So at number 7, another contentious one on the list was the Velvet Underground. The Velvet Underground was put together by Andy Warhol in the late 60s. They seemed to define sort of alternative rock, indie rock, and as who was it? Brian Eno, I think, said they might not have sold a load of records, but everyone who bought their records formed a band. I grew up in the 80s, you know, rebelling against that whole indie music scene, but aware that all the musicians that I worked throughout the 1980s were obsessed with the Velvet Underground. So it was really odd to get this pushback. I thought that was an obvious band. Right, so at number 6, I've got Led Zeppelin. People thought that they were too low on the list. Led Zeppelin are there just because of their huge fame. The love that people have for them. They've sort of become known as the greatest rock band of all time. When I look at the influence that they had, I don't think it's as great as people think. There's a sort of aspect of we could call it hair metal, glam metal, you know, the sort of White Snakes, the Guns N' Roses, the Aerosmiths that seem to take from Led Zeppelin as much as they take from the Rolling Stones. I think, obviously, musicianly, Jimmy Page launched 1,000 guitarists, and I'm one of those drummers that, you know, was inspired in my early days by John Bonham, perhaps the greatest rock drummer. I think they need to be on the list. Should they be higher? I think they're about in the right place, because above them is Black Sabbath. Now, if we are thinking in terms of eruditeness and quality, musical quality, Led Zeppelin have, unlike many rock bands at that time, they have a sort of aura of artistic worth, whereas Black Sabbath seemed quite knuckle-headed. And I think this belies the genius of Black Sabbath and the genius of Tony Iommi, that may not be the complete inventor of heavy metal, but more than anybody is the guy that created heavy metal as we know it. And everybody I know of a certain age on who picked up a guitar or drums or bass, right? We got either started through sort of soul, Motown, R&B, funk. There's that route through, which I know I haven't covered on this list, and I'll get to in a minute, because I love that music. That's the music that influenced me. But in terms of rock musicians, heavy metal stands there. That is the music we all come to. And that's down to Black Sabbath, which is why they're that little bit above Led Zeppelin. At number 4, without a doubt, the most contentious choice on my list, Kraftwerk, that I put at number 4. Now, originally I was going to put Kraftwerk at number 2, and I thought it would be an absolutely safe choice, because from my perspective, Kraftwerk has influenced all music from the 1980s onwards. All of it. Rock music, hip-hop, house music, dance music, rap, electronica, the whole lot. It's got a huge dose of Kraftwerk. I will address this near the end of the video. But some people seem to be horrified. And a lot of people in America decided it would be good to come on and say, well, I've never heard of this band, as though their ignorance somehow proves me wrong. But anyway, we'll get to that. At number 3, I got the Rolling Stones. Nobody had a problem with Rolling Stones being at number 3. They are the archetypal rock band. You know, they're one of the first bands to, you know, create riffs like Can't Get No Satisfaction. You know, they're there. At number 2, people didn't like this one either. At number 2, I got Cream. Studying this channel, reading every single book on the beginnings of heavy rock, the beginnings of jazz rock, the beginnings of progressive rock, those forms. Every single book starts with a huge chapter on Cream. They changed the face of music. because they were virtuoso musicians. They were a super group. They played extended songs. They had heavy riffs. They had long solos. They drew from a multitude of different influences, including folk influences, old blues influences, jazz influences. They put that all together. There's a widening of the songwriting subject matter with Cream. To me, this is the overwhelming band. This is the band that we all go back to. This is the band that Hendrix has listed to, or Miles Davis, or John McLaughlin when he forms the Mahavishnu Orchestra. It's all rooted in Cream, and yet people found this utterly baffling that I put this band that was only around for a couple of years at number 2. Anyway, that's what I had at number 2. Of course, I had number 1 at the Beatles, and everybody was happy with that choice. I didn't have one comment against that. So I managed this time to get through the list in 10 minutes. So if that's what you want these videos to be like, I will go for that. You know, so if you want to put a big thumbs up, say, that was much better. We don't want to hear you wittering on for an hour. And those who didn't want to hear me wittering on for an hour, put their comments up. There is a multitude of negative comments on this. And for those of you who think I don't get upset by it, I enjoy being pushed. There's certain things where people were right, and I had to think, yeah, they've got a point there. And that improves me as a YouTuber. I then go forward with those ideas in my head. This is always being refined. This isn't like the finished product. I will come back to the 10 greatest bands in the future at some point, and it will have changed. And there'll be a couple of suggestions that's come from the comments that I might take on board. I like that. Also, I don't get upset by the mean and nastiness. I don't know why. I find it quite funny, and I find it quite inspiring. This whole video has been inspired by the negative comments on this channel. And they do make me laugh, and hopefully some of these comments will make you laugh. Let's go through just a smattering. I haven't picked the worst ones. Right, I haven't picked the most offensive ones. I just quickly went through and grabbed them so you get an idea out of those 2,000 odd comments what's there. So the first one I've got is from Karen's Peas 2888, and they said, Pink Floyd not on the list 5 ? Then this list is seriously flawed. Consequently, I will not be listening to this video. Bye. Right, so Pink Floyd not being on the list is probably the number 1 complaint of many people who watch this video. Why didn't I put them on the list? But they're massively influential, without doubt. But they're not more influential than any of the bands I put on this list. That's the bottom line, okay? The idea that there's a billion bands, walking around sounding like Pink Floyd. Yeah, on the progressive rock scene, there's a sort of now a splurge of quite middle of the road progressive rock bands that take their lead from later Pink Floyd's, post Roger Waters Pink Floyd. I've heard that a lot. Bands like Radiohead have taken their influence from Pink Floyd, as have quite a lot of sort of avant-garde electronica, So I am not doubting their influence. Should they be on the list? Well, let's start from the top down. They're not more influential than the Beatles, right? That's fact. They're not more influential than Cream. I can't see how you could compare a drummer like Nick Mason to Ginger Baker, or guitarists like Dave Gilmour to, what's his name, Eric Clapton, or Roger Waters. Like instrumentally, studio-wise, they are doing some incredible stuff, but it's eclipsed by what Hendrix is doing, what Frank Zappa's doing at the same time. If you start going down the list, Kraftwerk, sorry, but no way. Kraftwerk, I'm going to get to an argument to Kraftwerk, which will argue that some people believe they're the most influential band in history. So that's what some people believe, and I have to get somewhere in between the two of these positions. Black Sabbath, no, they didn't invent heavy metal. Led Zeppelin, no. It's like, I work with musicians. The amount of times I've heard kids trying to nailed Stairway to Heaven, or trying to nail Kashmir, or trying to nail Paranoid or War Pigs. Never does any band try and play any Pink Floyd stuff in the general scheme of things. People who watch this channel like progressive rock, yes, you all love Pink Floyd. And I give you, they could be at the bottom of the list. I agree, they probably could have kicked out The Who and put instead Pink Floyd. They're around about there, but they're not more influential than the Velvet Underground. I'm sorry, they're not more influential than the Sex Pistols. You know, and this is what this is about. It's not about being the best, and it's not about being what I like. Believe me, I don't like Velvet Underground. I'm not a fan of the Rolling Stones. Who else is on this list that I'm not particularly keen on? Kraftwerk. It's like, I don't listen to Kraftwerk. I think they're geniuses, but I don't listen to them. So it's not my choice, which a lot of people thought it was. Yeah, Pink Floyd could have been on this list. They could have been on this list lower down, without a doubt. I'll give you that. I think they're vying for 10th place along with The Who. But even if I just isolate John Entwistle's effect on creating electric bass playing, just that one thing seems to eclipse anything that Pink Floyd innovated. Right. If you look at something like Dark Side of the Moon and look at the sort of conceptual continuity, and the Who've already done that in 1968, 69. By Tommy, they've done it even in a bigger level. There would be no Dark Side of the Moon without the Who. Can you see what I'm saying? It's like I could swap them out. I could, but I don't think it's right, and that is my position with Pink Floyd. Right. So let's keep going through these quotations. See what else we've got. Funny, Nirvana, it is to laugh, in quotations. The absurdity of these sorts of lists. These lists are absurd, right? They're interesting, right? They can be entertaining to go through. I think they form a very important function artistically, but the idea that they are an objective list, they cannot be. But they're not entirely subjective, or nobody would come and watch, would they? Think about it. And so I have lampooned, unlike anybody else who does top 10 lists, I have lampooned this at great depth, right? So, yeah, it is absurd. But even once they said, this person said it's absurd, they then go, Nirvana, but not the Kinks, or Pink Floyd, or the Beach Boys, or Bill Haley and the Comets, or the Crickets, or XTC, or Roxy Music. Nirvana, seriously? So what they're saying is Nirvana was not as important, as influential as those bands on that list. They have a point with the Kinks. I agree. I think the Kinks have a place deserving on that list. Them and the Rolling Stones and the Who are all sort of coming out at the same time, making the guitar more distorted. And the Kinks, you know, on You Really Got Me in 1964, are pretty much, they're very early in there. They are, without a doubt. The Kinks could have made the list. I accept that one. But the rest of them, no. And the Beach Boys came up over and over again. I will tell you what I think. I think that Pet Sounds is overrated. I think its importance is overrated. I think their greatest moment was actually Good Vibrations. And Good Vibrations shows up everything on Pet Sounds for me. Before that, they are basically a surf rock band, a very important one. But if you take Pet Sounds out of it and Good Vibrations, they are just Jan and Dean. And I don't see anybody championing Jan and Dean. And once you get past the 70s, they turn into one of the worst bands in history. And when I just did the worst albums, one of their albums came at number 2 of the worst albums of all time. Their position, I think, has been increased by Brian Wilson's story of being mad, the mad genius, and because there wasn't really a band to counter the effect of the Beatles. So I think there's a little bit of insecurity there on the part of our brothers over in the New World. Perhaps, I don't know. I just don't think they're that important, so I can't hear it. What happens on Pet Sounds in terms of the studio and the arrangement, Frank Zappa has gone way past that. Even the Beatles have gone way past that. What happened is that Brian Wilson was jealous of the Beatles, right? When he heard them, he felt right, and then he tried to do a Beatles. He was influenced by the Beatles, and he did it very well. It's a little bit like ELO. They're the same band. ELO come out in the 70s, and they do what the Beatles did, and in a way do it better, right? But ELO and the Beach Boys are not as important a band as the Beatles, right? And I don't think they're important as Led Zeppelin or Kraftwerk or Sex Pistols or any of the bands on that list. So no to them. Bill Haley in the comments. Look, Bill Haley in the comments. You see the Freudian slip. Bill Haley and the Comets, in terms of rock and roll, are pretty low down the list of importance. You know, so we've got Ike and Tina Turner. Well, Ike Turner in the early days, sorry, without Tina Turner. Ike Turner with Rocket 88. We've got Fats Domino. We've got Chuck Berry. We've got Little Richard. You know, that all those are immensely more important. The Crickets, yeah, the Crickets would be on the list, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that I forgot his name. That their frontman who died in the car crash, that in my senior, oh my God, this is one of the biggest. Hello, Mary Lou, goodbye heart. That's the bloody Everly Brothers. Oh my God, this has gone wrong, hasn't it? Here I am pushing back, and I've totally gone wrong. If you do, Peggy Sue. You do like an avenue. I had a single by this person, right? For some reason, I've gone completely blank. This is insane. This happens to me more and more. I'm sure it's Alzheimer's kicking in. You know, you could be watching something quite horrific here going on. So this, I wish I'd never mentioned. I got no internet. I can't even look it up. You are all shouting me the name of the most important rock and roll hero with the black glasses playing that Telecaster guitar with the Crickets backing band, you know, that then went solo afterwards. And this is the point. The Crickets are important, but what's so much more important is their lead singer and main songwriter. That's what's important. So that eclipses the band. Does that make sense? And I've been able to get through that without still not being able to remember this guy's name. It's unbelievable. Oh, XTC, great band. Nowhere near as influential as the bands on this list. Roxy Music, Roxy Music more influential. They influenced bands like Japan and a few of the art rock bands that came in the 1980s. I'm not going to be able to get through this video now. I'll tell you something. I want to know what that guy's name is. This is ridiculous. This is worse than I forgot Tony Banks' name out of Genesis. Right, so Beach Life 4704. So let me get this straight. Kraftwerk is in your top 10, but Jimi Hendrix is nowhere to be found. Jimi Hendrix is not going to be found. The Experience is a really, really important band, but I think Jimmy's input is more important. And I think, for me personally, the big influential album for me by Jimi Hendrix was Band of Gypsies. So I don't think it's the Experience that's important. I think it's Jimi Hendrix. So I didn't class them in the same way I didn't class Frank Zappa on the list, in the same way as I didn't class, Rory Gallagher on the list, or any of those people where or George Clinton, right? Or Sly Stone from Sly and the Family Stone. I didn't really want to put those on the list because I thought the main person's more important than the band. Right? Hendrix revolutionised an instrument like anyone before or since. He's the greatest guitarist of all time, and his influence and impact that he had in just 4 short years are still felt to this very day. In fact, he heavily influenced most of the people on this list. Totally true. So Kraftwerk over Jimi Hendrix, and then he puts "Pass the joint you're smoking and let us all have a toke." I have an issue with this idea that people will counter it, but then they've got to get personal with me, right? And I could get personal with this person very simply, saying if you do not understand the influence of Kraftwerk, you don't understand music history, so please just move on by, you know, and stop showing your ignorance to the people out there. So which is the next one we got? Kraftwerk. Nah, without Pink Floyd, your list is terribly tainted. I think I've covered that. Next one. Come on, you can do it, computer. Nathan Sanford 846. Please explain why James Brown's band is not mentioned. Not rock, but influenced other funk bands, P-Funk, most early hip-hop and rap. Seems biased to me. I'll wait. Right, so I decided not to put rap groups. I'm a massive rap fan, and it upsets the watchers of this channel that I'm such a huge rap fan. And I would love to put, you know, LL Cool J on here, Public Enemy on here, Tribe Called Quest on here, Run DMC, right? I'm interested in that, and I thought if I do it, it's going to skew the list a little bit. So I decided rap groups aren't bands, they're groups. You know, they're not like guitar, bass and drums, you know. So few of them are, like the Roots, for example. So I didn't include those, that's it. James Brown. James Brown's important, he's being James Brown. Yep, he got Bootsy Collins in the band, Maceo Parker. He'd got Clyde Stubblefield. These are incredible musicians, but they rolled around. And I don't think we can say that it was that band, especially the sort of dictatorial directorship of James Brown. It was James Brown. It's not the band, it's James Brown that's important. And a lot of those funk bands operate more like that. All the P-Funk stuff, it's a rotating band. There are bands like the Meters that were bands, the Earth, Wind and Fire. They're incredible. But those bands, I feel, aren't as influential as the big ones like Stevie Wonder, James Brown, Sly Stone, P-Funk. They're the monsters of funk and soul and all that sort of stuff. I am preparing a video on this. Right, so let's move on, shall we? Lol, whoever heard of the Velvet Underground? How is an obscure band in the top 10 most important? Clearly a very subject list. I am preparing the biggest bands of all time, just to show you the difference between being big and being famous and selling a lot of records and selling a lot of concert tickets and being important, right? As with Kraftwerk, Velvet Underground influenced a generation. And their approach to songwriting, the approach to subject matter, the almost like do-it-yourself approach to musicianship. Now, Lou Reed and John Cale were consummate musicians, but aesthetically they chose to explore an area that allowed people that didn't have the sort of skill of a Yes or a Genesis to access expression. Now, I know a lot of the viewers on this channel, they find that difficult to cope with. They appreciate music because they believe it's the skill aspect that makes music good. The skill aspect can be appreciated, but it does not make music good. Music also has a cultural aspect and it has a storytelling aspect. And when Velvet Underground, come out with a song like Waiting for My Man. Now, I'll tell you something. A few years ago, I played for Robert Plant in a band called the Priory O'Brien. And in that band, Robert picked songs that he had felt it influenced him. Right, and influenced Led Zeppelin and influenced that wave of bands that had come on and sort of ruled the world. Okay, so there's a list of songs that he brought in that were very influential to him. As a tribute to him, I have an album that he gave me, Behind Me. Right, a very influential band. We could say that the band behind me is the first grunge band, but that's another video, right? But that band behind me aren't that well known. Velvet Underground are far more well known, right? But when I was in that band, Robert chose Waiting for My Man by Velvet Underground, right? Robert Plant, the lead singer of Led Zeppelin, chose that as a song that was important. Now, why was it important? It took what Dylan did and it took that idea further forward. This is a song about waiting for your drug dealer to arrive. This goes back to early blues and it brings it into the heart of rock and roll. It's like a garage rock proto-punk track. It's very simple power chords. Kids could play it straight away. It has a snarl that's going to start to inform people like Iggy Pop. This is a hugely influential band. And if you don't understand it, you don't understand the history of music. And it's because your viewpoint is too skewed by coming from it from a progressive rock, classic rock, jazz fusion place. I'm the same, right? I know that I've got Velvet Underground's albums and I don't like them, but God, they're massively influential. And anyone who thinks they're not just doesn't understand it. This is a classic one. I think this is my favourite one. Stingray Mark 1 says, Pink Floyd? What are you thinking? Pink Floyd, I just want to know what that is, because that sounds like a cool band. And I might have to form that as a band, Pink Floyd. It seems to pull all the music influences that come to this channel. You've got the funk, you've got the punk, and you've got the pink of Pink Floyd all together in one name, Pink Floyd. Yeah, so I know what I was thinking. I don't know what you were thinking, mate. So let's carry on. Cream, he is one of the Cream detractors. Not sure I'd have them even in my top 30 most important. I'd put U2 in there somewhere. They took the idea of a band expressing social issues like The Clash, another important band, and putting them front and centre. Yes, they did. They did. They put social issues front. You know where they got it from? They got it from bands like groups like Bob Dylan and Velvet Underground. I wish I had one of the members of them here, and I could say, "Can you just tell them who you were influenced by on my list?" To say you're not going to have Cream and have U2 is just unbelievable. It's laughable that somebody would put that on. Sorry, right? A lot of people champion the Clash as well over the Sex Pistols, and I think because they feel that the Clash were more competent. I actually don't believe this, and I think, as I said before, the Sex Pistols are maligned. I came to John Lydon through the album by Pill, which is an absolute masterpiece. The thing that blew me away was his songwriting and his vision, and he's able to pull musicians as disparate as Ginger Baker, Tony Williams, Steve Vai, what's his name? Malachi Favors. I didn't realise it. Malachi Favors, who's the bass player of the Art Ensemble in Chicago, is on the album. John Lydon's a genius, right? And he was able to take a good, solid rock band and turn them into something poetic and masterful. The Clash were too, but what the Clash didn't do, they weren't as iconic as the Sex Pistols. But this idea, do I have to counter the fact that Cream were more important than U2 in the history of rock music? What are we dealing with? Who's this? Nail XTT said, "You totally forgot the Beach Boys, the most important after the Beatles by far." Why? What did they do? Right? What did they do? Bring the barbershop style into rock music? You know, what did they do that's so important? I'll tell you what they did that was important. For a few years, Brian Wilson used the studio in an interesting way, in a similar way as the Beatles were using, but also a similar way that people like Frank Zappa were using it. And not as extreme, but they did it in a very good way, right? They made an album called Pet Sounds, which was very important at the time, but I believe has dated a little bit since then. And I can't see how that compares to me to the White Album, for example. But people love the Beach Boys. Per Arne Jonsson 9063 has put Pink Floyd and then Joy Division ? Joy Division could well have got on this list. I think that if you look at Joy Division, that's the channel that Velvet Underground act through here in the UK to create the indie music scene in the 1980s. A hugely influential band, without a doubt. A New Order then go on. You know, if you take Joy Division and Kraftwerk, you put them together, you get New Order. But we do fundamentally go back to Velvet Underground and Kraftwerk. Cream is boring. This is Bernal One Films. Cream is boring, plus Eric Clapton is a right-wing crank. And Velvet Underground and Lou Reed are overrated. Black Sabbath, really? Plus seems to be how can it be such a list without Pink Floyd? It's not a serious exercise. And then he goes, meh. And then he does apologise. So I accept your apology. It's the same old thing. Where's Pink Floyd? Where's Pink Floyd? That's the most contentious thing here on this list. And then someone says, this is a lovely one. I like this one. Definitely, who's this? MRP4242, right? Definitely a boomer to have Cream at number 2. If you're going to full-on UK-centric, at least put Radiohead or the Smiths instead of Cream. Radiohead are like the darlings of the music industry, and they're a great band. OK Computers are fantastic. You know, they're in terms of a mainstream band utilising progressive rock influences, they're very important. Their influence, I think, you know, they influenced Coldplay, didn't they? And for that reason, I don't think we should put them on, should we? Who else are they? It's, you know, I don't know. And I would say Radiohead are as influential as Jeff Buckley, and I wouldn't put him on the list, although he's very influential. If we started to do a top 30, these bands would start to appear. I do not think that Radiohead have had the impact of Cream. They didn't invent heavy rock, they didn't invent prog, and they didn't invent jazz fusion. To some extent, they invented all of those three genres. The Smiths, very important band for my generation. You know, Morrissey was the great songwriter. Johnny Marr's guitar playing, very important. It's hard from a band from the 80s to exert the influence of these bands from the 60s, because by the 80s what's more important is the machine music, hip-hop, rap and all that stuff. That is far more important at that point. And so that's almost like a separate video. Right, see, let's see, here's another one. User, I won't read that out. You're out of your mind! Who the hell is Kraftwerk? Second, Velvet Underground. Are you kidding me? Please, Black Sabbath spelt wrong. Ahead of Led Zeppelin, which they are. Or does he mean, please? How can Black Sabbath be again? You know, this is the sort. I don't want to go through these anymore. I'm getting bored with them now. They're all too stupid. I think that was the last one I pulled out. So you get an idea of the sort of pushback I've got. Now the thing is that at the moment this video's had 125,000 views, and my videos usually had around about 5,000 or 6,000 views. So there's a lot of people coming, and we might have brought in a bit of hoi polloi from outside, which I'm all for. I open my arms to the hoi polloi. If the hoi polloi want to come and join us here, great on them. But the trouble is, when you open up the hoi polloi, you might get some hoi polloi opinions, which I think we've got here right now. The last part of this video, right, is my actual pushback against the big contentious ones. I'm not going to do every one. I'm not going to do too much on Velvet Underground, you know, or the Sex Pistols, but I am going to discuss Nirvana and Kraftwerk. All right, so I've got some quotes about Nirvana. This is Vernon Reid from Living Colour, who is an incredible muso guitarist. For those of you who want to turn around and say Nirvana couldn't play, and there were a load of people who couldn't play. You know, I think Dave Grohl has proved he can play, right? But anyway, Vernon Reid said this. Kurt Cobain changed the course of where the music went. There are certain people who can see the axis of musical history twisting on them. Hendrix was pivotal, Prince was pivotal, and Cobain was pivotal. That is an opinion that is out there by musicians that know a lot about music history, and my God, does Vernon Reid know a lot about music history. Now, if we go to Rivers Cuomo from Weezer, I can quote him here as saying, "It felt so close to what I wanted to do." This is listening to Nirvana. I thought, I can write chord progressions like that. I can write melodies like that. This is something I can do. This was right around when Weezer started. I probably wrote the Sweater Song and The World Has Turned and Left Me Here and My Name Is Jonas that month. All those early Weezer songs. And then we had our first rehearsal in February 1992. It's impossible to avoid the conclusion that Nevermind really inspired us to go for it. They are the punk band that, unlike the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, brought out an album that sold 30 million copies and influenced a generation. There's an argument. As I start to read this, I think they should be higher up on the list. That's what I start to think. Biffy Clyro's Simon Neil. I didn't really know who I was or what I wanted to be until Nirvana gave me an identity. This is what people feel about Nirvana. I've seen this all my life. Now, to get outside of rock music, let's say, here's a quote from Lana Del Rey. When I was 11, I saw Kurt Cobain singing Heart-Shaped Box on MTV, and it really stopped me dead in my tracks. I thought he was the most beautiful person I had ever seen. Even at that young age, I really related to his sadness. His music has continued to be my primary inspiration in terms of not wanting to compromise lyrically or sonically, right? That's the influence. That's why Nirvana got on the list. That's my counter. This does have a level of subjectivity. You know, you could agree or disagree, but you don't have to get so angry about it, because there are people that would agree. This is the whole point. This is why we have the conversation. And some of you are a little bit more open-minded, unlike the guy that said, you haven't got Pink Floyd on the list, I'm not even going to watch it. You know, they've scanned through it, they've seen all the little chapter things. I'm not going to watch this. I'm not interested in listening to him talk about why he's put them on the list. I'm happy to listen to the music I like and not have the validity of it questioned. Right, this is what's going on. Right, so I had a really funny one. I didn't want to put this guy on because it would have been a little bit embarrassing for him. But he came on and says, how can you put on Kraftwerk, you know, and not put on, and he mentioned two bands, and one of them was Depeche Mode. Now, I was quite aware that there's Depeche Mode come out of Kraftwerk. It was the most stupid thing to draw attention to. And so here is a quote from Martin Gore of Depeche Mode about Kraftwerk. For anyone in our generation involved in electronic music, Kraftwerk were the godfathers. All music is electronic music now. It has been for 40 years. And Kraftwerk were the godfathers. I'm building up to a climax of this video that will really upset anybody. Believe me, I am, right? Frank Dorris is the editor of a Copper magazine. I don't think Frank's that well known, but I thought what he said here really sums up my feelings about this band. Every, and I mean every, techno, house, dance, club music, etc. artist owes their existence to Kraftwerk, as do bands like New Order, Depeche Mode, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark, Daft Punk and countless others. A fact most of them readily admit. 2 Kraftwerk songs alone, Numbers and Trans-Europe Express, set the rhythmical template of hip-hop. African Bambaataa, guy we can't mention anymore because of he's someone we don't mention anymore anyway, I wish I'd said that. But African Bambaataa, one of the architects of hip-hop, sampled Kraftwerk. Go and listen to the message by Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel. It's Kraftwerk. There's no hip-hop without Kraftwerk. Now, I'm sure you're going, well, that's probably a good thing, and I don't like all of this music. We're not talking about what you like. We are talking about influence and importance. Kraftwerk are very important. Right? Now, here is Jude Rogers from The Guardian. Yes, I had to read The Guardian to go and get this quote. So, look at what I've done here for you. Right? Kraftwerk's beats laid the foundations for club music, for hip-hop, for synth pop, for techno and house. The sounds they invented have been sampled by hundreds of artists, including Madonna, R.E.M., Missy Elliott, Fergie, Coldplay and Jay-Z, who have all had hits with their elegant melodies and their image, who have all had hits with samples by them. I'm not reading this out very good. Their elegant melodies and their image has influenced David Bowie, Daft Punk and Kanye West. Daft Punk, one of the biggest bands in the world at one point, are basically Kraftwerk. Now, I am now at the end of the video and I'm going to finish with this contentious thing, right? I was being kind when I put Kraftwerk at number 4. Paul Morley, who has created a documentary on Kraftwerk, has made the claim that they are more influential than the Beatles. There are people out there that feel like Kraftwerk is the most influential, important band in music history, right? That they created the scene of rock and roll, of pop, club, house, rock, the whole lot. That if you put on the radio now, what you're hearing more than anybody else, more than Dylan, more than the Beatles, more than Hendrix, what you're hearing is the aesthetic vision of Kraftwerk, right? I could have put them at number 1, but I didn't because I didn't want to upset you. So please be aware that I do care about your feelings, all right? So next time, before you, I haven't got no problem with you countering me and pushing back, but when you want to get personal, I haven't read out all the ones that just insulted and swear me. I get a whole ton of those, and YouTube shuffles those off to a special folder. The folder of hate. And I love going in the folder of hate. It always gives me a laugh. I always like it. But music is about discussing different views of how we feel about the world around us. And to be able to reach a consensus is a very useful thing. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to subscribe and watch more, I will allow you to do that. Now, press the like button, because I think I've started to go, like, I've been sort of ordering my watchers to press the like button, because it doesn't hurt you to press the like button, does it? You can press it now. It's not gonna cost you anything. It's not gonna bring any sort of stuff your way that you don't want to see, is it? It's just a like button. But in doing that, I think that's why this video went so viral. So please, press the like button, hit subscribe if you want to. If you want to support me, I have a Patreon. We've just set up a Patreon Discord and a Patreon WhatsApp. And my patrons are on in there, and they've taken it over and they're sharing their music. If you're a budding musician and you like the weird music I talk about, who is there to play your music to who's going to like it? I tell you what, my patrons. So if you want to join that group and start sharing your music, it's fascinating, go and become a patron, and You'll find the link if you search for WhatsApp in the Patreon. There's so much content there you'll have to sort through. But if you don't want to become a patron, you can put some money in the PayPal tip jar, and that is there as well. I've come to the end of this video. For those of you who didn't like my microphone, look, there it is over there. I'm not used, I've gone back to the old ways. I have got my light though. There's my light there. I've got my light. I don't know what to do with that microphone. I might use the microphone when I'm on my Zoom chats because the audio is truly awful. I think that microphone's better than that. But it just shows you that people don't want the quality, right? They don't care about that. They just want me talking into camera. I've gone back to doing that, and I think this is a better video for me doing that. You know, because I know that I haven't got to go and sync up audio and all that type of stuff. I'm not a very technical person. I like to just work freely. I like to just say what I say. And for those of you who stayed to the end of the video, the bespectacled guitar playing genius that fronted the Crickets was Buddy Holly.